Hello, welcome to the Crates Motel. My name's Conan. I've had quite a few requests for this. Black Friday, what should I buy? So what I'm going to do today, this is completely subjective. I'm going to go through my 5 favourite paid for plugins in the MPC Standalone and obviously software. Just before I get into it, I want to point out that I'm not affiliated or sponsored by Akai or any of their associates. Let's jump in. So this is not going to be a deep dive into each individual plugin. I'm just literally going to run through the 5 plugins, explain why I like them, and maybe that will give you some insight and perhaps that will persuade you to buy them in the Black Friday sales. The sales this year are absolutely insane. So we're going to jump in. We're going to start off with Airsoft Clipper. I use this well, I've made a video about it, but I tend to use it whenever I've been showing how to master in the MPC. But obviously you can use this on multiple sources to get the best levels or a bit of drive or a bit of character out of your samples. I'm just going to show you how I use it on a drum beat, for example, here. So really the point of Airsoft Clipper is to get maximum level and reduce the dynamic range, but also you can get some decent character as well. You can imprint some character into the sample. It's really, really nice with drum beats. It will bring up the noise floor. It will reduce the dynamic range. It will create that kind of crushed sound. Not necessarily completely crushed if you use it subtly, which I have shown when I'm doing mastering in the MPC, or I've shown how you can master in the MPC. So we'll just quickly run through it. So obviously there's a volume jump, but what you can hear is I'm reducing the dynamic range. I'm bringing up the sound of the room a little bit. It just gives the drums a lot more character. It kind of brings the room reverb and the character of the drums, how they were mic'd up, etc., into the equation, which is what I like using it for. Similar way that you would use a compressor, but obviously with the clipper, you're shaving off the peaks rather than kind of rounding them off or compressing them. Next is the Airflavor Pro. This to me, even at the full price, is a deal because you're basically getting 6 plugins in one slot on your MPC, and we all know that there's only 4 slots per channel. So having 6 effects in one slot, you know, it's a no-brainer. But not just that, they're decent as well. You know, they're worth. It's worth the money, let me put it that way, especially in the sale. There's so much you can do with it. I've done a deep dive video on it, but basically you can imprint some lo-fi flavor. You can imprint some grit. You can add some distortion. You can add vinyl sounds. You have, in the volume, you can add like kind of take dropouts and stuff. In the tom, you have the chance to emulate speakers and earbuds and headphones, etc. Digital, you can change the bit rate. Vinyl, you can add vinyl noise. Distortion, you have various different model transformers, tubes, etc. that are emulated. And then in pitch, you can kind of get wow and flutter effects. So you're emulating it being played on reel-to-reel tape, cassettes, or a warped piece of vinyl, etc. But you know, overall, to have 6 effects in one slot and have so much to play with, you know, you could spend all day just playing around with this, and it can be used in so many different ways. And to be honest, I'm not a massive fan of some of the presets in Akai. I think they're often, this is my opinion, I can't say whether this is gospel, but I get the impression sometimes that some of the presets in the MPC are not made by musicians. They may be made by the people who coded it. Some of them don't sound anything like what they're supposed to be emulating. For instance, the SP1200 one on here doesn't, but it actually does sound nice. And that's the thing. Don't necessarily think, oh, okay, oh, that's going to sound exactly like VHS. I mean, Who knows whether that sounds exactly like VHS, but who cares? If it sounds good, the presets are a good place to start off, let me put it that way. Don't worry too much about what they're actually called and what they're supposed to emulate. But yeah, Airflavor Pro, I can't sing with praise enough. It just does so much, and for the price that you can get it on Black Friday, it's a no-brainer for me. That's my opinion. Okay, so plugin number 3 is an emulation of the Mini Moog. Fantastic synth, kind of a synth that it covers so many genres. You kind of have to have it. I'm not saying go out and buy it now, you have to buy it. But really, for lo-fi, for hip hop, for house, for synthwave, for rock, for jazz, for funk, it's a no-brainer. You have to have a Mini Moog. This is the emulation of the Mini Moog. It's pretty decent. There's plenty of VSTs out there that do the same thing. There's plenty of Romplers as well. I've owned an original 70s Mini Moog. I've owned the newer Voyager, I think it was called. I've sold all my hardware now, so I don't have those anymore. But there's a ton of VSTs that I use in my DAW. There's Arturia, Softtube do a good one. There's tons. It's kind of like the go-to. It's kind of the synth that everyone, does a version of. But it's pretty decent. In the MPC, you've got the same kind of controls that you'd have in the original Mini Moog, where you have control over the oscillation, the mixer, the filters, the amp envelope. You've got some extra things in there like EQ. You've got some chorus effect, a delay effect. It's decent. I would definitely say it's decent. It's decent. Does it sound exactly like a Mini Moog? I don't care. I can make it sound exactly like a Mini Moog in my opinion. The thing is, just let me explain something about the Mini Moog. I have actually said this in a video before. I don't tend to do reviews on synths very often, just purely because I'm not, I prefer to do videos about things that I really do know something about. And I'm not a sound designer. I know how to play a synth. I have basic knowledge of sound design. I understand ADSR, that kind of stuff, but I'm not a sound designer or a keyboard player by any means of the imagination. So that's why I don't tend to do reviews on synths. But one thing I will say about synth sounds in general, I hear so many people, they'll use an emulation or even the real thing. I know people have actually got real 1970s Mini Moogs, and they'll say to me, why can't I get it to sound like Stevie Wonder? Why can't I get it to sound like Herbie Hancock? Rick, I can't think of his name. Wakeman, is it from Yes? Whatever. I really should get out of the habit of saying whatever about people. It's terrible. Anyway, that guy from Yes, famous Mini Moog players and sound designers, etc. And people will say to me, why can't I get my Mini Moog to sound like that? I've got the VST, I've got the original 1970s hardware. It doesn't sound like it. The truth is the reason is it isn't just the synth. It's the amplifier that it was plugged into, it's the mixing desk it was plugged into, it's the tape machine that recorded it, it's the microphone that was used to mic the amp that it was used, it's the room that it's in. There's so many variables that make that Mini Moog sound that you hear on Stevie Wonder records or Herbie Hancock records. I say those as go-tos because I know those tracks really, really well. Yes as well, obviously I know their stuff really well. So when you have Mini Moog emulations, and even when you have the original hardware, there's more to it than just the synth, getting it to sound exactly how you like. So I just want to point that out. So when you buy a VST or a plugin or the original hardware, don't expect it to instantly sound exactly how you want it to sound. It takes a lot of work. That said, the Mini Moog emulation in the MPC is, in my opinion, fantastic. And the fact that you have a Mini Moog inside your MPC, wherever you go, if you've got a Live 2, stick it in your rucksack, you're carrying around a Mini Moog. You can't argue with that. So I would definitely look at that. And with the price that it's on Black Friday, definitely consider it if that kind of sound, and also it's a really, really good synth to learn how to sound design. Most of my very basic knowledge has come about from programming Minimoogs. So the next one is the Jura, based on the Juno synths, obviously. If you're into your synthwave and your 80s stuff, also early house, people like Mr. Fingers, a lot of the early techno artists, they all use Junos. So, you know, again, it's a really, really easy synth to program. I used to have a Juno 60. It was my favorite synth. It's one of the only synths that I actually miss. Don't miss my Minimoog whatsoever. It constantly went out of tune and constantly needed calibrating and constantly needed tender, loving care. But the Juno, you could throw it in the back of a truck and it would work, and I loved it. It's one of the only synths that I miss that I used to own as hardware, the Juno 60. The 106 is amazing as well. I mean, that, especially in house music, the 106. So the Jura is decent. Again, you have all the controls that you do on the original Juno 60. You have control over your LFOs, etc., the PWMs, all of those abbreviations that I don't necessarily know exactly what they do. Well, I know what they do, but I don't know what they mean. I don't care, to be honest. And the filters, the envelopes, these are the things which I do tend to understand. They're the fairly straightforward things. But you also have some effects. They do the Jura chorus effect as a separate plugin, I think. Actually, well, not I think, I know they do. I don't think personally that they nail the Juno chorus that well. There's some other VST versions of it. There's actually a free VST version of it, which I think does a better job. But it's okay, it's decent enough. And you've got other chorus effects in the MPC, free plugins in the MPC that you can add. But it's decent. And if you want that 80s synthwave and early house sound, you kind of have to have a Juno 60 or a Juno 106. So definitely look at the Jura. You have an ARP as well in it, which is really, really cool. You also have a chord and a unison, which is really, really handy. I use that quite a lot. I'm not a big fan of ARPs, to be honest with you, but the ARP is really, really easy to program and use in the Jura. So definitely have a look at that. And then coming out, finally, the OPX4. Now, I've owned various Yamaha DX synths in my time, the DX7, the DX100, which was the little baby one with solid bass on it, or lately bass, and the TX81Z, which was a rack mount, DX11, I think. So again, massive 80s sound. And if you're into the FM synthesis type sort of thing, again, I personally find FM synths the most difficult things to program ever. And I'm not even going to pretend to you that I know what I'm doing, but I know how to get a fairly decent sound out of it. The presets in here are great, as are the ones in Jura and the Mini D as well. But if you're really into FM synth and you want to learn about FM synthesis, then jump in on this. Just go deep, deep, deep on it. There's a whole load of things that you can play with. There's some effects in there. It really is. I mean, that's the famous sound that we all know. The electric piano in the DX7 was kind of, I mean, it was one of those sounds that you know instantly. It was used on an unbelievable, probably 25 million records. I'm going to hazard a guess that the electric piano from the DX7 was used on. It's a decent emulation of it. I can tell the difference just purely because I know the sound so well. But if you want a real kind of like hands-on experience of an FM synth and you don't want to go through the ball ache of owning a DX7, again, that's another synth which does need a lot of tender loving care. The TX81Z rack mount was a bit more hardy in the studio. You could kind of kick that around a little bit. Don't want to give the impression that I kick around my synths, because I looked after them probably better than anybody you would know. But anyway, it's a great introduction into FM synthesis. And again, you've got it inside your MPC. Chuck it in your rucksack. with these three synths, in my opinion, you've got the three, you know, fundamental synths. I mean, maybe an Oberheim would be nice, or a Poly 5, some of the Korg ones, but at a base level, you've got everything covered. You've got pad sounds covered, you've got ARPs covered, you've got bass sounds covered with these three synths, in my opinion. And picking them up on Black Friday, all three of them, I can't remember exactly what the price is, but I think you can pretty much pick up the three for what would normally be the price of one, I think. Don't quote me on that though, because the prices are slightly different in different countries. I'm in Dubai, so it's in dirhams. But yeah, the Minimoog, the OPX4 and the Dura, for me, cover all bases. That for me, that does everything. I use my Minimoog for my funky funk sounds and bass sounds and lead sounds. OPX I will use for some pad sounds and some atmosphere sounds. Really, really good for atmosphere sounds. And then the Dura for lead and for bass and for basically everything. The Juno 60, I mean, yeah, it covered all bases and basses as well. Sorry, terrible joke. So they're my 5. So there you have it. They are my 5 favourite paid for plugins in the MPC. Pick them up whilst they're on sale. Thanks for watching. This is the Crates Motel. My name's Conan. Till next time.